And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most important IU basketball stories from the past 7 days. This is our 79th edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 409th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, June 7th, 2018. I am your host, Jerod Morris. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion.
Smart takes a shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
Wednesday night, the Indiana Senior All-Stars battled the Indiana Junior All-Stars in their annual showcase game. The exhibition featured 3 players on the senior side who will be attending Indiana University next season: Romeo Langford, Robert Finnessy, and Demezi Anderson. And the game would have featured 2 uber-talented juniors who are considering Indiana, Trace Jackson Davis and Keon Brooks, but they could not play due to their tryouts for the USA Basketball Under-18 team. With no TJD and no Brooks, you might think the seniors would breeze to a victory playing on Romeo Langford's high school home floor. But not so fast. The Junior All-Stars led by as many as 11 early and took a 7-point lead into halftime. And according to Demezi Anderson, that is when Romeo Langford decided enough was enough. Josh Margolis recounted Demezi's recollection over at Inside the Hall. Quote, "It was a fire in his eyes. I saw it on his face," Anderson said. "He was locked in. We could feel it. He was about to go to work. He's about to be focused. We've just got to jump on his back and have him lead us," unquote. And lead is exactly what Romeo did. He sparked an 18-1 run to start the second half, and the seniors ended up cruising to a 111-101 victory. Sure, it was only an exhibition, and it was the seniors playing the juniors without 2 of the top juniors even playing, but it's still encouraging to see Indiana's 3 in-state freshmen having a solid winning chemistry on the court and in the locker room. Plus, there may be some games next season in which Indiana needs Romeo to have that fire in his eyes and help lead a second-half charge, and for one more night as a high schooler, his play suggested that he'll be up to the task. All right, now let me introduce my esteemed co-host for this week's show. To my left, he is one of the world's most respected bracketologists. He's the president emeritus of the Robert Johnson Fan Club, and he will forever be known as the person who gave my daughter her first Indiana hat. He is Andy Bottoms. Andy, what is your bottoms line on the last week in IU basketball?
Well, your daughter should get ready because my wife has a whole pile of other stuff ready to send you as we've been going through some things, including, I believe, one of the first Assembly Call shirts that you ever sent my kids.
You guys are so lucky. I'm never going to have kids, so you don't have to send stuff like that.
You could have just stopped. Yeah, you could have just stopped after So Lucky. You're never going to.
Totally, yeah. The world is lucky.
Well, yes, we all share in the excitement there. No, I mean, not a ton to talk about. I mean, I could talk about incredibly early bracketology where I think IU is a 7 seed, but I feel like talking about that is really giving a little bit too much credence to what that actually is. So I'll pass on that. Yeah, I did see today though a couple of the guys. I think Jake Forrester and Jerome Hunter both, putting that'd be about 5 days till they get on campus. So just kind of another step in the process, really getting those guys in. As you mentioned, the Indiana All-Stars. And that stuff should be wrapping up here shortly, and get these guys on campus and get things started. That's, as you think about ways to get yourself through the offseason, getting everybody on campus and together seems like the next logical step, and start to build that chemistry that some of those guys already have, as you mentioned, Jerod, and what hopefully the rest of them will develop with the veterans that are already there, and a lot of stuff from Cliff Marshall about what he's got those guys doing in the offseason. So. Not a ton to get excited about in the offseason, but getting those guys on campus to me is a pretty big hurdle to clear, and getting them there and everybody, in on time and ready to go.
And now, to my right, he's a man who somehow maintains a cordial relationship with Indiana fans despite his general disdain for both Simon Scott Assembly Hall and John Mellencamp. He's a columnist for The Big Lead, and he's someone who, when he's not watching tape, lots and lots of tape in preparation for our scouting report segments, is pondering the truly meaningful questions in life.
How do you say dough in Norwegian?
He is Ryan Phillips.
I am Superman, and I know what's happening.
Ryan, what is your rant this week?
First of all, I have nothing against John Mellencamp. I don't know where you got that. Just throwing that in. That is
because you've been demanding new songs.
Well, I want to switch it up a little.
Well, you're going to get your wish. You're going to
Thank you. I don't see anything wrong with a little variety. Feel bad for your wife if you don't change it up every once in a while. No, I think you guys both hit what I was going to talk about. I think that it's been awesome seeing on Twitter, seeing the guys just the incoming freshmen just super excited to hit campus and move to the next chapter of their lives. I mean, forget the basketball angle. I think we were all sort of excited when we were going to college, and remember that feeling. And so I think that it sort of gives you a little bit of nostalgia for heading to campus. I get to live in my own apartment or dorm or whatever and do different things. So I think it's exciting whenever young people get to do that and experience that for the first time and get, ahead of the curve in life. And I think that we're all excited about seeing these guys progress, not just as players, but as people as well. And I think that's what's special about Indiana basketball is the focus on them as people and how when you do come to Indiana and most of these guys seem like they're going to be here for a while. I mean, other than I think Romeo, we all expect to be here for a very short time, but all the other guys we expect to be here for a while. We're going to see them grow, see them change as people and see them progress in their lives and go on to what I'm sure will be great things. So that's always really exciting for me, just seeing those guys get interested, just seeing how excited they are to get on campus. And then I think you were right too, Jerod. I thought that was the story of the week, the Indiana All-Star game and everybody commenting on Romeo sort of, getting the snarl, as we used to call it, whenever Kobe Bryant would go off or Michael Jordan would go off. You get that kind of look in their eyes, like it's time, it's go time, and I'm not going to let my team lose this game. And that's quite frankly something Indiana's been missing since Yogi Ferrell left. I think that Yogi in his senior year, maybe up until his senior year, didn't display that, but then in his senior year, there were several games where you just saw the look in his eye, like I'm going to do whatever it takes to not lose this game and to go out and win it. And I think that Indiana's been missing that guy. And so I think that's part of the excitement with Romeo, not just the scoring, not just the NBA ability, but that he's a guy who wins and he gets things done. And he doesn't seem to care if he's the one getting it done or if he's making plays for other people. He just wants to win. And I think that Indiana needs a little bit of that attitude. And I think Archie Miller's going to love that coming in. And, lastly, I want to say, Andy mentioned this last week, but the stuff that Indiana is doing with their basketball Twitter account, I went back and looked. I had missed it during the week. I went back and looked at that feature following around Deron Davis for a day. That was fantastic. The video they put together of Juwan Morgan for his comeback, for his coming back for his senior season was great. I know that when Archie Miller got on campus, he said he wanted to modernize the Indiana's approach to social media. They're doing it. It's fantastic. Go back and check that stuff out if you haven't, guys. Really cool. And I hope that they do one of those, day in the life of for all the players. You get to see Deron interacting with a bunch of different people in the athletic department, doing his rehab, interacting with tutors and stuff like that. It's really fun and a nice behind the scenes look. And I think it's a great way to connect fans with the players as well. And I'm glad that they're leveraging that and sort of moving into the 21st century with that kind of stuff.
All right, this week on Assembly Call Radio, a question hit me a few days ago. I wonder if we may be underrating the impact of Robert Johnson's departure. I want to get Andy and Ryan's thoughts on that.
I don't think Andy's underrating it.
Well, no, that's probably true. Then we're going to go in depth on Justin Smith, his tantalizing potential, his strengths, his weaknesses, and realistically, what a sophomore breakout would look like for him. And then, of course, we'll close by answering your questions in segment 4. All of that coming here on Assembly Call Radio. Real quick before we get to that, I want to tell you about 2 great ways to shop online for tickets and for IU gear that also help us out at the same time. Remember these 2 URLs, iutickets.shop and iustore.shop. Memorize them, bookmark them, because when you use them to buy IU tickets or gear, we actually get paid a commission for referring you. So iutickets.shop will take you right to SeatGeek, where you can browse the latest listings on IU basketball tickets and always find the best prices and deals. You can also search for IU football tickets, sports tickets, concert tickets, anything. As long as you use iutickets.shop to get there, we'll get credit. And as a bonus, use the promo code ASSEMBLY to get $20 back after your first purchase. iustore.shop will take you to the official IU online store where they have gear for everyone and everything, from shirts, hats, and jerseys for adults and kids to tailgate gear, office gear, basically you name it, and they've got it. We really, really appreciate you bookmarking and using those URLs because the commissions add up and help us cover the costs of running the show, as well as helping to make sure that Ryan has basic amenities where he lives.
My apartment complex has a bowling alley in it.
Again, the URLs are iutickets.shop and iustore.shop.
Thank you.
Okay, you're listening to Assembly Call Radio. I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. And so let's talk real quick about Robert Johnson. And here's how I want to preface this. And Andy, I'll get your thoughts first. You know, we're all talking about the improvement that we expect from Indiana and how much better we think Indiana can be this year. And a big part of that is Romeo Langford's addition and what he will give us at the guard position that we didn't have last year. But I wonder if in our excitement to project forward and think about the possibilities of what Romeo can bring, we forget that, you know, despite some of his ups and downs last year, Robert still had a really good senior year, 14 points, 4.5 boards, you know, shot 37% from downtown, had some really big performances on the road. And of course, defensively, he was outstanding. And Romeo clearly has better long-term potential. You know, he is a more dynamic scorer, but still freshman Romeo Langford coming in, having to adjust to the college game. You know, if he were to just put up the numbers that senior Robert Johnson put up, they might be a little bit disappointing given the hype, but that would still be a pretty solid season for a freshman. And so for Indiana to really take a huge step, is it possible that maybe we need to look for the growth to come from other places instead of just this massive growth at the two guard position? Because what Indiana got from Robert Johnson last year was actually pretty darn good. And still, you know, they weren't as good as what we would have expected. Or am I crazy and I'm actually underrating how much better Romeo is than Robert Johnson?
Well, I don't know that I'm certainly not the least biased person to answer this question. So, everybody can take that with a grain of salt. I think what you get in Romeo that you would say you didn't really have in Robert Johnson is a guy that the other team feels as though they have to focus on and they have to try to take away. I think Robert Johnson was certainly well respected among other Big Ten coaches and programs, but I also don't think, as much as he played for IU and as many, points as he was able to score over the course of last season, I don't know that he was a focal point for opponents in the way that Romeo is. And I think that has the opportunity to make everybody around Romeo better, maybe in a way that Robert just, wasn't quite wired to do. I think from a skill set standpoint, the shooting is a big one because that's something that IU lacked, was consistent, long range shooting. And I think the thought is that that's something Romeo is going to get, but he's also a guy who can put the ball on the floor. And I think Robert did that at times, but was, at times also inconsistent with really, impacting that part of his game. And the thing that I do think will be the biggest drop off, but I don't think I think it's something that everybody is cognizant of, is really on the defensive end, where Robert was a guy you could go stick on, the opponent's best perimeter player, and he's going to go out and play 35, 36 minutes a game and really be, that bulldog that kind of got talked about a couple years ago defensively. And I think that's something that, we've talked about how good can Romeo be defensively based on his length and things like that. But it's also not something that he's been asked to do a whole lot. But I think that of the things that Robert Johnson brought to the table is the one that is probably most widely acknowledged as that those are going to be, that part of his shoes are going to be the hardest for Romeo to fill. But I think just how dynamic Romeo is offensively, it just adds a different element and forces opponents to game plan for him differently than people probably would have for Robert Johnson.
Ryan?
I think I was just trying to help you guys out, because I know you love it when I'm muted. But I think that the thing we're missing here is the raw numbers from Rojo may not look that bad, but he was wildly inconsistent. And that was the problem. And what I think you get with a guy like Romeo is consistent scoring. And Indiana, while Robert Johnson's defense was fantastic, and I don't think that Romeo is going to be as good defensively initially. I think he has the potential to be as good defensively, over time. But as a freshman, I think it's going to be harder for him to just lock guys down like that on a consistent basis. I'm sure he can knock out fantastic defensive possessions, but Robert Johnson gave it to you every time down the floor pretty much. what he will do is add consistent scoring. And quite frankly, that is what Indiana was missing last year. Robert Johnson played a lot. He was inconsistent from three. He was inconsistent on his driving. He was inconsistent. There were times he'd disappear for long stretches of games and he didn't feel like a threat. And I mean, we noted the 3-point shooting was just all over the place last year, and we noted it repeatedly. So I think we're kind of looking back on it fondly, when I think during the season, if you had asked us about his offense, we would have said it was a big problem. And it was at times. And you're right.
Bite your tongue.
Well, hey, I love Rojo and you know that. But I think that as you noted, there were some big performances that I think paper over some of the bad ones. And, getting 29 points at Iowa was a huge performance. But at the same time, there were games that were bad enough that really balanced those out. And so I think with Romeo, you're getting consistent scoring. But again, I do agree with your premise, though, that you need help elsewhere. It's not just replacing Robert Johnson with more scoring that's going to make Indiana better this year. That helps, but it's everything else gradually improving as well that really is what makes this incoming team better than the one last year.
Well, and, for example, Newkirk's minutes going to an improved Devontae Green and Robert Finney will help. McSwain and Hartman's minutes going to some combination of Justin Smith, Evan Fitzner, and some talented freshmen should help.
Morgan with another year,
Yeah, I mean, that, so you've got to get growth from all of these different places. So I just wanted to make sure that we covered that. And I think you guys made great points about Romeo. And that's why I wanted to bring it up here, because you guys usually reasonable.
One other quick thing. I think, we talked about Devontae Green being so important last year because he was one of the only guys that you felt like could really create his own shot.
That was huge, yeah.
And that was a case where that was somewhat out of necessity, and Robert ended up with the ball in his hands in some late shot clock situations, but that really wasn't where he was best suited. I mean, you hit all those stats about how he fared as a spot-up shooter in some of those other scenarios. That just wasn't really what he was most adept at doing. And so I think, you're going to find certainly in pressure situations that Romeo is going to get the ball and ideally be able to create his own shot. And the combination of he and Morgan will be, a really formidable one for Big Ten opponents. So again, if you think about other things last year's team was missing, that ability to create your own shot was something that not a lot of guys had. And certainly something Romeo would be expected to have right out of the gate.
I think the ideal situation for Robert at Indiana would have been as the third option, where he was your defensive stopper and could knock down threes.
What he was in 2016.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, and that was when I thought he looked like a guy who was going to go down as a great all-time IU player, and I think he went down as a good player. I mean, we love the kid, but as far as his on-court success, it didn't live up to necessarily where we thought it would after his sophomore year, because he wasn't built, and there's nothing wrong with that. He wasn't built to be the 1A option, and it's not his fault. That's just not the player he is. He is more of a defensive guy who, when he steps up and gets you 15 points, that's great, but you don't need to rely on that every week, every game, every week.
Yeah, the burden of all the hats he had to wear and what was expected of him last year wore heavy on him at times, for sure.
Yep. Okay, coming up, we continue our offseason player-by-player breakdown by discussing a talented young player who is by far the most popular choice among IU fans as a breakout pick for next season. He produced a lot of highlights as a freshman. Will he be ready to be more consistent as a sophomore? We'll discuss. Stick with us. Okay. And that ends segment one.
Look at that. New music. I love it.
New music.
That was awesome.
Strategically chosen to go.
So I have a question about the music. Is there like a list we can use?
I mean, based on what Kent said, as long as it's only like up to 30 seconds, you can use anything. That's what I'm operating on. So
okay. Well, I mean, it's a radio station, so I assume they have the rights to them,
Yeah, I mean, he told me any song you want to use up to 30 seconds. So I'm just, I'll let he and Scott know that we've got some new music just in case they want to check it out. But
and if they ever come after us on the podcast about having music, we'll just say, okay, we'll delete it. They'll just be awkward silences.
Yeah.
Or the Apple bass tones they give you, like the regular.
Yeah. Okay, so the way that I wanted to structure this is kind of do it, similar to how we did with Devontae. We'll look back at his freshman season. I've got a couple of little clips that we can play real quick just with some highlights. So I'll give a quick overview, and then let's just get, kind of reflections on his freshman season. And then I think it'd be interesting to talk about what is realistic for him, because everybody talks about the breakout. What does that look like? And I've got a couple comparisons that we can make. So we can hit both of those topics in the first segment.
Okay.
And then second segment, we've got the numbers, and we'll kind of go in depth on strengths and weaknesses. And that first segment was kind of long. We just may not be able to get to as many questions as we want to. Wow, that first segment was like 19 minutes. That's one of the longer first segments we've ever had.
How long was it?
Because Ryan talked forever.
Oh, excuse me, Mr. 4-minute banner moment.
I know. We stretched that out a little bit. Yeah, so that was 19 minutes. So that's all right, though. I did a mailbag on Monday, and so that's like a way that we can get to some of the extra questions, since they're usually extra questions.
So, by the way, we are officially announced the radio show we're doing on Saturdays in San Diego, and we don't have a name. So, if anybody wants to tweet me name ideas for a radio show in San Diego, please do that, because we only have a week to come up with a name, and we haven't yet.
Sweet.
So, yeah, we don't have a name.
San Diego chicken shit? No, is that what about that one?
Ooh,
No.
wow.
No.
Wow, that's rough. That's rough.
Just wanted to go immediately. It's San Diego chicken is the first thing I thought of. What are you gonna do?
That is rough. Maybe like Sons of Spanos.
No, we're definitely avoiding. My mom thinks we should call it Unbolted, which I thought was funny, but we're trying to
That's a pretty good name. Unbolted.
We're trying to avoid any references to the Chargers.
Interesting. Okay.
So yeah, it's not for you guys to think about now. Just if you're watching.
No, I'm going to think about it the rest of the show.
Wait. You're saying people shouldn't think about the name for a San Diego radio show while we're talking about Indiana basketball to Indiana?
I'm doing it for you, actually.
I'm just kidding.
But yeah, tweet me, guys, if you have anything. At Rumors and Rants, at Assembly Call, anywhere. Just put suggestions out there.
Yep. Okay, let's hop in. And
I'm gonna go. You go with the rumors and pants, like the.
Oh yeah.
That account every once in a while pops up in my requested accounts.
Yeah.
Rumors and pants.
What about the no talent West Coast? No, you probably
can't.
Yeah, probably couldn't call it that either.
No, I can't.
Oh man,
damn it!
My friends all suggested that. Actually,
that's a good one. All right, here we go.
All right.
Let's go with the next segment. Okay. You guys ready? All right. You are listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. If you ever have to miss all or part of an episode of Assembly Call Radio, there are two great ways to catch up. You can subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search for Assembly Call, or you can watch our live broadcasts on Thursday nights and participate in the live chat on YouTube. And when you watch on YouTube, for better or worse, you get all of the between segment banter that doesn't make it into the radio or podcast edit, which in a recent episode included Ryan making this bizarre admission about where he stores his microphone after the show is over.
Yeah, in my pants.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/assemblycall.
That you guys don't keep yours there?
No, I keep mine right here on the microphone stand.
Oh, okay.
That's why it was very odd that you admitted that.
I was just trying to keep it warm. I don't know.
All right.
Is that where the term hot mic comes from? Is that no?
Boom.
Is that where the term boom comes from? How long can we do this? Okay, let's talk about Justin Smith. So let's begin this by just taking a quick look back at his freshman season. And I think when you think back to the freshman year that Justin had, he really had exactly the kind of freshman season he should have had based on his recruiting ranking. You know, he was a 4-star guy, 78 according to 24/7 Sports. He had some highs, 20 points at Minnesota, double figures in 4 of the final games. You might remember this big shot that he hit in that Minnesota game.
There's the freshman Smith having a career day, and he hits a 3. Wow! Indiana up by 1. What a shot!
Friend of the show, Dan Dockich, there on the call, courtesy of ESPN. So he had some highs, but he also had some lows. After scoring 12 against Maryland on January 22nd, he had 5 games of 6 points or fewer before finishing strong. And so overall, he finished with 6.5 points, 3.2 boards, and 15 minutes per game. But over the final 6 games, he had 12 points, 4 rebounds, and 21.2 minutes per game. So he improved as the season went along, played his best basketball toward the end of the season, and notably, Archie made a big deal about how his approach changed after the Christmas break and really being impressed with that level of maturity. So I think, when you look at his freshman season, there's a lot to be pleased about. It wasn't, the 5-star, become an All-American type freshman season, but it was solid. He showed growth. And that combined with his athleticism and just some of the tools that you see are why everybody's predicting a breakout for him this season. So before we talk about what that breakout might look like, Ryan, what are your general thoughts as you reflect back on what Justin produced as a freshman? You're muted. Maybe take the mic out of your pants.
Again? Yeah. No, I think we saw a guy who had a much better feel for the game than I think we expected. I think we expected an athletic guy who could maybe score some, grab some rebounds, but would need to learn the game a bit more and learn, how to have, maybe up the basketball IQ as he went along. And I think that I was pleasantly surprised how quickly he adapted to the college game. And he had what was pretty much a typical freshman year where there were some ups, there were some downs, but I think that the overwhelming consensus from people is this guy's going to be a good player at Indiana. And I think you'd hear that on broadcast. You'd hear that from people who just discussed him and discussed his game. And I think that that's the way I felt too, is it looks like he is going to be a real good player who's versatile, can play the wing, can play sort of more of a down low position if he needs to, can guard several positions, and looks to have really good form on his jump shot and a developing jump shot. If he figures that part of his game out, he's going to be a dangerous player and a guy Indiana can rely on. And I think it's great with the influx of talent coming that you don't have to have him be your go-to guy or even your number 2 option as a sophomore. He can sort of ease into a role and find his way along. And I expect a big jump from him this year. And I think that Indiana is going to have to rely on him at times. And that's not a bad thing, because I think he really can be that guy. And I think Archie's right that you could see on the court that the light sort of went on with him after that Christmas break.
Andy?
Yeah, I think, in addition to what Ryan said, I think just the overall activity level and making smarter cuts to the basket. I thought by the end of the season, he and Juwan were playing really well together, playing off of one another well. And I think as I look ahead to this season, it's really we've had some of these conversations in the offseason in terms of lineups. It's trying to figure out where he's really going to play, what kind of lineups he's typically going to be used in. Because I think he was asked to, do a few different things last year, depending on where he was. He played a lot of 4 in some ways. It felt like in the front court, which I don't know if that's, where he really ends up. And so I think being able to solidify, is he really playing more to the 3 is going to be important for him. And the big thing is the shooting. I mean, when you think back about the best games that he had, that Minnesota game, he was able to step out and make shots. And if he works on that part of his game, in addition to, working on his body over the course of the offseason, and becomes a reliable shooter, if, one or both of he and Juwan, as we've talked about, are able to step out and consistently make some shots and space the floor, that becomes huge. So that's really, to me, the next step for him to take. But I think just in terms of understanding the activity level and the focus needed to be able to excel in the Big Ten, I think he really showed a good grasp of that and an improved grasp of that as the season went on and down the stretch, as you mentioned.
You're listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Brian Phillips doing our off-season player breakdown of Justin Smith. So it's easy to say, okay, who's going to be the big breakout player? Justin Smith. But what does that breakout actually look like? And the way that I want to frame this to you guys is, are the progressions that Victor Oladipo and Troy Williams made as sophomores a good proxy for what Justin could do as a sophomore? And I don't want to think beyond what those guys did and what Victor became and any of that stuff. I just want to go from their freshman to sophomore seasons, because there are similarities, in where they were recruited. Troy was the highest recruit of the 3, and then Justin in the middle, and then Victor after that. And what they produced as freshmen was very similar. Victor averaged 7.4 points, 3.7 boards, and 18 minutes per game. Troy averaged 7.3 points, points, 4.4 boards, and 21.5 minutes per game. And Justin was right there, 6.5 points, 3.2 boards, and 15 minutes per game. But as I said, it trended up toward the end of the season to be a little bit closer to where those guys were. So if you look at what Victor and Troy did as sophomores, Victor improved to 10.8 points and 5.3 boards in about 27 minutes per game, although all of his shooting percentages dropped. So he didn't really become more efficient. He just played more minutes and his production rose. Troy actually became a little bit more efficient and even had a better sophomore year than Victor did with 13 points and 7.4 boards in 27 minutes per game. So, if you look at what Justin did just over the final 6 games of last year, could he do that over a full season? And would that be considered kind of this breakout that people are hoping? 12.2 points, 4 rebounds in about 21.2 minutes per game. Because when you look at what Victor and Troy did, that seems like a reasonable thing to expect from Justin if he's going to, if he's getting into that 24 to 26 minute range. And I don't think that's unfair, to just to compare him to those two guys just going from freshman to sophomore. So Ryan, is that kind of what the breakout looks like to you, or does it look a little different?
I think if he does what he did over the final 6 games last year, that 12.2 points, 4.0 rebounds, I mean, obviously being more minutes, I think, but I think that those points and rebounds would be spread around to other people. So you wouldn't expect more minutes to equal necessarily more points just automatically. If he does 12.2 points, 4.4 rebounds a game, I think you're really happy this year. Averages that for the whole season, because the thing about Justin is he doesn't seem like a huge rebounder. He's not going to go out there and grab you 10 rebounds consistently. And Troy was able to do that just because of his ridiculous athleticism. And he was able to, get in the mix above his size and above his weight and above his positioning. He really wasn't he wasn't great at blocking guys out, but he chased the ball well and he had great athleticism to go up and get it. Justin has that too, but I think that you're not going to see him racking up a ton of rebounds, particularly on this team when I think a lot of guys are going to be collecting rebounds. So I think that 12 points and 4 rebounds for an entire season from him, you'd be happy with that. You love to see more. I mean, you'd love to see 12.6 rebounds and maybe a steal or a block a game or something like that. But I think that given the rest of the roster with Juwan Morgan, Romeo Langford, hopefully an improved Devontae Green, and then guys like Race Thompson chipping in and Fitzner and those guys, if you get 12 points out of Justin Smith, I think you're thrilled. And consistently throughout, if you average that for the season, I think you're thrilled.
Andy, what does a Justin Smith breakout look like to you?
Yeah, I think it's, when you look at some of the shot totals down the stretch of the season, so kind of take forget about the Rutgers game, as we would all like to. He had
Rutgers game.
13 shots against Ohio State, 11 against Nebraska, 7 against Iowa with 7 free throws, 7 against Illinois, 5 against Minnesota. I mean, if you look at some of those games, it's certainly hard to envision a scenario where he's getting dramatically more shots than what he got in those kinds of games. So in that regard, I think those numbers seem somewhat reasonable. I mean, maybe I'd go closer to 10 points and things like that. I do think he's a double-digit scorer. He certainly seems to be what I think most would argue is going to be the third option behind, Romeo and Juwan. And I think if you're doing, you're projecting that forward, that's maybe a 10, 11 point a game guy. I think to expect much more than that, something has probably not gone to plan with somebody else. Doesn't mean he can't score that many points. I just don't know that within the general flow of what they're trying to do, he's going to get enough shots to really, score a lot more than that on a regular basis. And I think the rebounding is interesting. We heard last year the focus on guard rebounding and those kinds of things. I struggle to think that, he did well on the offensive glass. I think his offensive rebounding percentage was really strong, but the defensive glass, not as much. I don't know that that's something that improves. Again, I think some of that depends on, what position he's playing and what you're really expecting him to do, whether if he's playing the 3 versus if he's playing the 4.
Yep. All right. Well, coming up, we continue our analysis of Justin Smith by assessing his strengths and weaknesses based on both the advanced stats and film study, and then pinpointing his biggest areas for improvement moving forward. That's coming. Stick with us. Okay.
Well, it's 2-1 Capitals. The Knights just scored, and they're challenging the goal. Very exciting.
Very nice. All right, so let me check the time on that one. Good. So that one was about 11:30, so that's good. Picked up. We got ourselves back on our usual track.
All right.
That was good. Chad, yes, I did get that from Space Jam. Fly Like an Eagle by Seal. Just trying to appease Ryan with new songs. That's what we do.
True.
All right, we have a suggestion for a show.
Okay.
Name The Morning After. I don't think that's bad.
The morning. Wait, what time is the show?
9 to 11.
So what is the commonality between you and the other two people that you're doing this?
Yeah.
Two of the guys have been longtime producers at the network, and I'm just like I am on this show, just kind of the asshole that shows up.
So you're not going to actually do any of the preparation work. You're just going to like show up 2 minutes before, slide in your chair, take your microphone out of your pants, and start talking.
I prepare for this show. I don't know what you're talking about.
Your microphone out of your pants.
Where else am I supposed to put it? They don't give you a microphone holster. It's
I kind of like the unbolted thing, but I don't know that. But you're not only doing football stuff, so to have
no, and I think that and the other thing is that this station just picked up the Rams. The Rams are going to broadcast on this station too, so it's really fun. And they announced that like 2 days ago to like huge fanfare, and so what's really funny is they in the same week they hired the national voice of hating the Chargers, and they got the Rams broadcast in the same week.
Twist the knife.
Let's continue noodling on it. I mean, the morning after is fine. But it doesn't seem like it has any type of like organic meaning to what you guys
it just seems very, very bland. Well, we thought of The Hangover, which I thought would be good. Especially for it's a Saturday show. I think that works, but like the Saturday Hangover or Saturday Sports Hangover or something like that. But I don't know. Kicking around ideas.
I think I like that better than the morning after.
I agree, but one of the other guys likes morning after. Somebody was just like, hey, what about this? What about this? And what about and it's one of the guys' names show, like joking around. And I'm like, I don't know. And he's like, what about the Merv Griffin show? I was like, oh, that works.
Okay. Here we go. All right, you guys ready for segment number 3? More Justin Smith.
Yeah,
we'll start strengths, and then I'll introduce some strengths, and then you guys hop in, and then we'll do weaknesses after that. Good?
Okay.
Here we go.
Go ahead, you got all of them.
Welcome back. You are listening to the Assembly Call. So here is a little fun fact. We actually have over 5,600 IU fans from around the globe who subscribe to our email newsletter.
There's a high-level operation going on out there.
And you can join too. It's easy. Just text IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. You will get our weekly 6-banner Sunday news roundups, as well as our post-game analysis emails once the season begins. It is all free, and it will make you a smarter and more well-informed IU basketball fan. Again, go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join for free today.
Make no excuses.
I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. We are continuing our offseason breakdown of Justin Smith. And so let's dive in, guys, and start talking about some strengths and weaknesses. And let's start with the strengths. I think the number one strength is pretty obvious. His athleticism and his physical development. You know, he looked more mature than your normal freshman, and we know how good of an athlete he is. We expect working with Cliff Marshall that will only continue to get better as he goes through in his college career. I also thought that he really showed some strong basketball instincts, especially on offense throughout the season, and especially against his own. You know, we saw him time and time again working that short corner, you know, really putting himself in a position to receive passes in a good place.
Especially as the season went on. I think you're right.
Well, and we'll talk about, you know, in the weaknesses, sometimes he got the ball in a good place, but he couldn't finish. And so that's clearly something that he's going to have to improve on. But he was in the right spots, which you don't often see from freshmen. And I think when you look at where he really succeeded offensively, and these are some numbers from Synergy Sports, it's really when he was on the move. When he was in pick and roll situations, he was actually in the 91st percentile, 1.364 points per possessions in those situations when he was the man setting the screen. And then, Ryan, you mentioned his rebounding, as did you, Andy. And he right now is a much better offensive rebounder than a defensive rebounder. And he's terrific at turning offensive rebounds into points in the 81st percentile, 1.296 points per possession on offensive rebounding opportunities. So a good offensive rebounder, good finisher there. And I'll tell you the other thing that I like about Justin that I think is a strength for him moving forward is he expresses great humility in his public comments, crediting teammates, crediting opponents, and on the floor, where he doesn't try to do too much. He fits in, he does what he's supposed to do. He's not, going outside of his strengths or going outside of his offense. And I think that will help, on this roster that he'll be playing on with much more talent this year. And the next step for him will be kind of learning how to assert himself a little more as he gains confidence and stature in the program and improves his skills. But he's starting from a place of good humility, a great attitude, great character, and that's going to work well for him in the future. So, Andy, as I look at Justin, those are the main strengths. What stand out to you as the biggest strengths in Justin's game?
Well, we talked, I think we hit on a little bit of the stuff, before where, the pick and roll scenarios, the timely cuts, offensive rebound. I mean, those are all, the first two are kind of a feel for the game type scenario, but really just it's a guy who's using his strengths. The first strength you mentioned with athleticism. I mean, all of those things are somehow tied to, athleticism, being able to make quick movements and things like that. So that shows, one, a guy who is using his strengths, and two, a coaching staff who is putting him in positions to be successful as a freshman. And as you said, not really asking him to do too much. So I think those things are positive, and I think it's a good foundation to build on. Does he eventually become a guy that you can isolate a little bit more, or who can maybe post up with the smaller players on him? You're playing a team that's, playing a 3-guard offense, things like that. I don't know that he's there yet. But I do think the instincts are good. And that's one where, you brought up Troy Williams earlier, and, we talked about the, baseline cuts and things like that. Those are the kinds of things that I think Justin Smith can do. Again, he's not Troy Williams. But I think if he can use some of those kinds of things, with the amount of attention that defenses are going to focus on Juwan and Romeo, he's a guy who can really slip in behind and give himself a chance to get some really easy buckets, which I think he did last year on a team that probably had less talent offensively, and he was still able to make something out of that.
Right.
Yeah, I think what I loved about Justin when he stepped on campus, you mentioned athleticism and physical development. I thought he was in great shape in high school and looked like he had a college body in high school. I thought he looked even better when he stepped on campus at IU. This is a kid who worked hard and got himself into great shape before he even committed to IU. And then you could just see the leap he took. And one thing that I loved was that he was a guy who maybe not statistically got better as the year went on, although that kind of bears itself out over the last few games. But he mentally got better and better and better as the year went on. And I think that you did see him running that short corner. You saw him going for those. I think, we see him as the classic Troy Williams baseline lob play, where you would cut into the baseline behind his defender and get a lob. You saw Justin doing stuff like that. Even when the pass wasn't delivered, he was sort of hunting for ways to put pressure on the defense that way. And even if you don't score that way, you're making the defense react to you. And it's an underrated part of the game. It's the old, cut hard even if you're not going to get the ball, because the defense has to react to it. That can open up something for somebody else down the road. It can open up something for somebody else in that moment. And it also makes them have to respect you when you are on offense. Even if you're not scoring, they have to react to you and they have to account for your movements on the court. And I really liked what I saw from him and his growth as the season went along. I think that was the biggest takeaway for me, was this is a kid who had a maturity about him on and off the court, and it seemed to continue as the year went on to grow. And he really grew as a player, and it seemed like on the mental side of the game as a person as well, which was really impressive. So he's one of those guys you look at and you think, at a lesser school, that guy would be the guy. I think he really could be at a smaller school, maybe in a mid-major. He's the guy they build around. But at Indiana, he's a guy who can be a really nice complementary piece that maybe moves up to an all Big Ten type guy by the time he's a senior, if everything on his development goes well and if he continues on this trajectory. He's a real exciting player, and there were so many things I liked from what I saw from him last year, and I loved your comment on his humility because it's so true.
You're listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Brian Phillips. We're doing our off-season breakdown of Justin Smith. So we talked about the strengths. There's a lot to like. We know that. But let's talk about some of the weaknesses and some of the areas where Justin's really going to need to improve to make good on all these breakout predictions. We talked about the rebounding. He only had a defensive rebounding rate of 14%, which was like 7th or 8th on the team. So not what you would expect maybe from a guy with that level of athleticism and that's so good on the offensive glass. He also is not a guy who's going to create for others. His assist rate was dead last on the team, below everybody. So that's not something you're going to get from him. And I think surprisingly and maybe a little bit disappointing is from a steal and a block percentage, those numbers seem low given his athleticism. For example, both numbers were less than Freddie McSwain's last year. And Justin seems like a more instinctive player than Freddie McSwain. But even when you go back and look at Justin's high school stats, he's not a guy who racked up a lot of blocks and steals. So that may just not be something that's really in his repertoire. He's a guy who his production is really going to be counted more on points and rebounds and kind of big momentum shifting plays and being in the right place. Doesn't seem like a guy who's going to generate a lot of steals and blocks like, for example, Juwan Morgan does. And from an offensive standpoint, we talked about finishing through contact. Archie Miller, I don't know if he called him out specifically, but, certainly alluded to him being soft early in the season. That seemed to get better. It will need to continue. And as a stationary offensive player, as a spot-up shooter, as a post-up guy, he was really poor last year. In the 5th percentile, in the 10th percentile. He's going to get some open looks. Maybe he won't be posting up a lot, but he's going to get some open looks because of the attention that Juwan and Romeo are going to draw. He's going to have to get a little bit better at converting those opportunities, and then also learning to play without fouling, because he committed 5 fouls per 40 minutes last year. And if he wants the number of minutes to rise, he's obviously not going to be able to foul so that he stays on the court. So, Andy, I think those are, from a high level, those are some of the obvious weaknesses that jump out. What others are there? And of those, what do you think are the most important ones for him to have the breakout everybody's expecting this year?
Yeah, it was interesting on the shooting percentages, because I, without looking at the numbers in my head, had thought about some of those challenges with finishing around the hoop. And then you look up and he was in conference play, made 57% of his twos, and which ranked, I think, 17th, it looks like, in the conference. Now, the flip side of that is, there weren't a ton of shots that he took that weren't right around the rim. I mean, I don't know, the number of, kind of mid-range jump shots, but to me, that was a negligible number. So maybe if you think you're taking the majority of your shots within 5 feet of the hoop, 57% doesn't seem as good as it might sound. So I definitely think that it is a factor and something that he struggled with early. And then I think, just getting used to the physicality and not getting calls and some of those kinds of things. I think that for any young player is going to be a factor. I think the big thing for him from the ability to jump minutes wise is going to be how much can he improve defensively. I thought he did okay at times against when he, go back to that Minnesota game. I thought he played really well against Jordan Murphy inside, which is not necessarily what you would expect out of a guy like him who's given up some size and things like that. If he's going to play more of the 3 and ends up being put out in space on the floor a little bit more, it's odd to say that about a guy who athletically you feel like can do it. But as you said, defending pick and rolls and some of those kinds of things, just overall awareness, being able to block shots and get steals and being able to, jump plays before they happen without fouling, with those, 5 fouls for 40 minutes. I think that probably, one, we already know about Archie, that if you're not going to play defense well, you're probably not going to play as much as you might think you should. And 2, you look back at some of his struggles in that area. I think those are the biggest things that he needs to do, because if he didn't develop a jump shot and took the kinds of shots that he got last year within the flow of the offense, I think you'd probably live with that. You might be a little bit disappointed and say he didn't grow the way that you wanted him to. But I think offensively, if he kind of held steady and got a lot better defensively, I think he'd still find plenty of time to play. While I think we expect him to get better offensively, I think defense is the biggest thing for him, because if he's going to play the 3, we've talked about this before, there's a lot of guys lining up on this roster who could see time in that spot, with the McRoberts and trying to figure those kinds of things out. So I think that's the biggest thing for him to get better at as a sophomore.
Right.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the complaints about him, or that not complaints, but the weaknesses are things that a lot of them you can tally up to just being a freshman and finishing through contact. We say that about everybody who comes in because it is a different level of physicality. It just is. It's a huge jump. You're playing against essentially grown men as opposed to high school boys.
His was just accentuated because he had so many opportunities to do it.
Of course. Yeah, sure. And certainly. And it's certainly a worthwhile thing to point out. And it's great that there's film of that for him to watch and say, oh gosh, yeah, I do need to get stronger at this. I think also the fouling, I think that's a huge thing that a lot of times with maturity, and smarts on that side of the floor really develops. You just learn how to take different angles and not foul and not use your hands when you're playing defense and use your feet and all that stuff. And defending the pick and roll, I think, is the same thing. You just kind of get used to it. He could probably get away with things when defending the pick and roll in high school that he can't in college. Just certain, you have to anticipate better. You have to be able to step away or step out better and all that stuff. So a lot of that develops. I agree with you. I think defensive awareness, big time, that comes from getting in the film room and then getting on the floor and using what you've learned in film and putting it on the floor, specifically in practice. I agree. Spot up shooting. He's a guy with his size, with his length, and with his release on his shot. He should be able to hit shots from the outside, and he's going to have plenty of opportunities, and he's going to have a tough shot to block because of that length. And I think you're right. Strength around the basket. That is certainly something that as we mentioned, all freshmen go through and they all have to get better at.
Yeah.
I felt like we had an amazing conversation on all levels.
All right, thank you, Archie. We appreciate the kind words. All right, let's move on. Coming up in our final segment, we answer your questions. As always, there are a lot of good ones, including a request for our bold predictions that are also realistic, and who we think is the most overlooked player on the current roster. That and more coming up next. Stick with us.
Well, I lived on the outskirts of town.
Still had to sneak in one Mellencamp song there for you, Ryan.
I am totally fine with that. Like, I just think, and it's one of those things where, like, I'm fine with a show full of Mellencamp songs. I just don't think it should be every week. I think we can, or throwing in 2 and then 1 AC/DC song, or, whatever it is. Like,
I had a little time today, so I was able to find some extra songs.
Attaboy.
That's right.
Crap, the Knights are up 3-2.
Mm.
I am not Vegas.
Fake news.
I hate that term, by the way. Please never play that one on the air. That's my least favorite term, fake news. I hate it.
Really? I almost played it during the show today, and then I changed it.
Because my dad occasionally says it, not in the way that other people say it, but he sometimes will say that to me. He's like, I think that's fake news. I'm like, don't use that friggin' term.
Have you ever actually heard the actual context of the full drop? Here's what you actually said.
I'm going to trademark fake news.
Like, I don't know what conversation we got into where you said you're going to trademark fake news, but that was the context for where that came from.
Well, you're the one who recorded it. Shouldn't you go? You're the one who pulled it. Shouldn't you go up and find out?
Yeah, I don't remember. It made me laugh. I don't remember what the context was.
I hate that term so much.
All right.
So
well, out of respect for you, I will only try and find one spot to use it every show henceforth. No, I won't use it. I'm not a jerk.
Sure about that?
I don't think so. Okay, so let me get a quick time check here. All right, so that was about 14:09. So we're at about 44:39.
So 5 minutes.
No, because we do 52.
Oh, okay. Hang on.
So let me talk amongst yourselves.
7:21. Right?
I gotta grab something real quick. I'll be right back.
7:21. So we'll get out at about 6:45. Yeah, about 6:45. Like, I haven't been going super precise, and no one said anything because I think they can probably just cut off the end if it doesn't fit. the exact time, and it can sometimes be a little bit hard to pinpoint these exactly by the second when we're doing it like this.
Yeah.
But anyway, 6:45. So we'll definitely hit this first question. We should try and go quick with it though. It's a good question. Alex's question. We can hit both of those. There's a lot of good questions this week. We're just not going to be able to get to all of them.
Yeah, there was a lot.
Roll some over to next week, though, always.
Well, some to next week, and then I'm going to try and do, and if you guys ever want to join me for this, I'm going to try and do a mailbag like on Monday or Tuesday. And typically I try and just like pop them off real quick during the day. So I know you might not be able to, but it gets, it's a pretty easy show.
You know, Jerod, Bill Simmons invented the mailbag. Just ask him.
That can't be true.
No, he can't. It's so funny. Whenever I think it was like Jonah Carey or somebody did a feature, and Bill Simmons was like, you completely stole this from what we used to do at Grantland. And Jonah listed like 7 examples of other people who had done it before him. And he was like, no, but we changed the way it was done. And you're just, and I think he said something about mailbags or something. Like, he's like, I'm the one who popularized the mailbag. I was like,
Are you a fan of Simmons?
I used to be, not anymore.
No.
The problem the mailbag, Dear Abby. So suck on that, Bill Simmons.
No, here's the thing about him, and I think that he's a talented writer. I do think he's a talented writer, and he had something. The problem is when he went from being a fan who wrote to styling himself as an expert, it all went out the window, because his whole charm was that he was like any one of us writing, and he was good at it and funny, and he talked about the things we talk about and all that. But then he became like, he tried to make himself a basketball expert, and 90% of his basketball opinions are moronic. He thinks just because he grew up watching the Celtics that he's a great basketball analyst. And, like he did the book of basketball or whatever. And there's so many stupid conclusions in there. My problem with that book. My problem is that he's a guy who talks about basketball like it's a video game. Like, if you have one guy who averages 21 points a game on one team and another guy who averages 24 points a game on another team, and you put them on the same team, they're going to average 45 points a game, and it'll be great. And it's like, totally discounts the fact that, they have to play together and they have to fit together and all that stuff. And I don't know. It just doesn't make sense. He also ripped Woj 2 years ago. It was great. He hammered Woj for reporting that, and you don't question Woj. You never question Woj. And he said that the vertical, when Woj launched the vertical before he went back to ESPN, he said that Golden State, this was in the middle of the playoffs, that Golden State, I think it was right at the beginning of the playoffs, Golden State was working on figuring out how to fit Kevin Durant in. And everybody was like, what are you talking? Simmons was like, that's such crap. He's just trying to launch his website and get hits and all this stuff. So stupid. They're not thinking about Kevin Durant. They're thinking about how to beat the Thunder, and they're thinking about this or whatever. Fast forward like 3 months later, they signed Kevin Durant. And he was just like, yeah, I was wrong about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no kidding, Bill. We know.
All right.
You can't question Woj. He's the godfather.
You can't question Woj. Okay, you guys ready for segment 4? We got about 6. I'll keep the time in here. We'll get out about 6:45, so we can try.
The audience, to the audience real quick. I'm sorry, that was my Bill Simmons rant. It's nowhere near as vicious as the Coach K rant, but I just, that's.
No, that was solid. I mean, you can't like make up emotion.
I can't do a material every week. I mean, it's.
Oh boy,
gotta save that for the season.
Oh boy, now you're gonna be saving it for your radio show, so we're not even gonna get any of that. We're gonna be down to like C material.
Oh no, are you kidding me? I can drop way more on here than I can in there.
Okay. Here we go. Let me get this ready. Okay.
Could you let me on a bus? I'll ask 21 questions, and they all about us.
You're listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, wrapping up another week of talking Indiana basketball. And it is segment 4, which means it is time to answer your questions. We got a ton of them. We're going to try and get to as many as we can. If you noticed last week, I did a mailbag on our podcast in between. So that helps us kind of handle some of the questions that we can't get here on the radio show. But let's start plowing through these, see how many we can get to. The first one comes to us from Alex on Twitter. He says, what is your realistic yet bold prediction for this year? I think Justin will test the NBA waters with no agent after this year. So that's Alex's prediction. That would be a pretty bold prediction, I would say. I'm going to say that Juwan and Romeo both make at least second team All Big Ten, that they're two of the 10 best players in the Big Ten. And some people may not think that's that bold. So I will also add that I think either Devontae or Justin Smith will make honorable mention All Big Ten. Not necessarily both of those guys, but I think one of those guys will make honorable mention All Big Ten. Andy, what is your bold yet realistic prediction?
Boy, I'll throw out a couple. So one would be that Devontae starts every game at point guard.
Wow, that's a good one.
Whoa,
I wouldn't say that's bold yet realistic. I would say that's just bold.
that's bold.
Not a bad way.
Could
I
be
like
realistic.
it. I'm on it.
I guess the other would be probably somewhere around that IU would finish in the top 2 of the conference. I think that's probably not where people would predict, but I think it's possible given the guys that came back other places. So I'll go with those 2.
All right. Mine is that Romeo Langford will not lead the team in minutes.
Interesting. So you're saying that Juwan will?
Maybe. I didn't say that, but no. And
who
I think,
else is going to do it if it's not Romeo?
But what I will say about that, my implication is I think Juwan will be healthy all year and will outpace Romeo Langford in minutes.
Okay.
So.
Okay. So Alex's second question: who do you think is the most overlooked player on the team? And I'm going to say right now, I think the most overlooked player is Evan Fitzner, because I think we're underestimating the impact of a big guy who can shoot 40% from downtown on a roster that had nobody that shot 40% from downtown last year. And, we'll have to see what he does from a defensive standpoint, but especially given Duran's injury, I think, and the value that his experience will bring. So, in other words, what I'm saying is I think Evan's going to be better than advertised, certainly better than he's currently being advertised. Whether he'll have the impact of Max Bielfeldt, I don't know, because that was a pretty high bar. But I do think we're underestimating how many lineups Fitzner is going to work his way in, because he can shoot 40% from downtown and space the floor to open things up for Romeo and Devontae to do their work. So
fitting that you bring that up on Max Bielfeldt's birthday.
Oh, it is Max Bielfeldt's birthday. That's
Francis
right.
Parker High School, everybody.
Happy birthday, Max.
Yeah, happy birthday, Max. One of our favorites.
Andy, who do you think? Or Ryan, you go first.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in. Most
Stunning.
overlooked. Yeah, I know, right? Well, I think it's going to be Race Thompson. I think we're going to see a lot out of Race this year, especially with Duran Davis injured, and I think that he's going to have a leg up on the other freshmen because he's been on campus for a year. I think he's going to be great, and I think I really love I love his game. Obviously, we haven't seen him for a year, but I love what I saw on film before he entered. I think one of my most memorable parts, aside from the game losing 3-pointer when we were in town, was Jerod and I are standing on the floor and Race walks by, and I look at Jerod and I was like, dude, he's big. Like, he looked so much bigger in person than he looked on camera and that he had looked in high school. And I think we both recognized that, and we're like, oh yeah, no, he's big. Like, he's a lot bigger than you think he is. So yep. I think he's my guy who everyone overlooks.
Okay, Andy.
I had 2 guys in mind. Race was one. McRoberts is the other. I think it's just easy to see the talent come in and everybody to write him off and say he's not going to get minutes. But he does all the things that Archie wants somebody to do. So, and
if anybody thinks McRoberts isn't going to get minutes, they are foolish. Especially,
I don't think people think he's not going to get minutes. I think he's going to. The assumption is there's all this talent. He's going to fall off minutes wise a lot from last year. Not that he won't play, but I think to assume even that he might not start it could turn out to be foolish. And when he turns into senior year Dane Fife, I've talked about before, then you won't be able to take him out.
Over under McRoberts playing 50% of available minutes this year.
Over.
Ooh, 50%. That's high.
I know.
Ooh.
I think first half of the season he'll hit that, but I think he may not play quite as many minutes second half of the year, but he'll still be playing a lot of important ones.
See, that's what I would think, is that I think he'll play important minutes. I don't know if he'll play half of them in the second half, and that's not a bad thing. That would be a good thing for IU because it would mean that other guys stepped up. It wouldn't mean that Zach's losing that spot. It would mean that other people are winning those minutes because Zach's not going to lose time. I think other guys,
and there could also be some particular matchups that aren't great for him either. Where he could not play quite as much. So. Okay, let's hit this one really quick. This is from Jerod on Slack. So much optimism this season, understandably so, but I think we need to level it out a bit. Which player do you think is most susceptible to a disappointing season? And what do you think will keep them from the productivity they're capable of? Ryan, who do you think is most?
Oh, you got to go to me first on this one? Gosh. I would say susceptible to a disappointing season. I think Al Durham And the reason why is because I think there's an influx of talent on the perimeter, and I think there's a potential for him getting lost in the shuffle. And I hope that doesn't happen because I like Al a lot, and I like his ability, particularly on the defensive end. And I think he's pretty good getting to the hoop. But I think that there are other guys who can do a little bit more. Plus, a guy like McRoberts can play the off guard, an off guard / wing position. Justin Smith can move out to the wing. I think that you're going to have, a Jerome Hunter as well. I mean, there's just an influx of talent on the perimeter, and there's a chance that maybe he gets left behind. And I hope that doesn't happen. But I'm saying I think that that's potential.
I'm very confident that could happen.
Yeah, very confident it could happen.
Andy.
Well, I think we don't have a ton of time. I'll say Duran potentially, just because I think the injury and those kinds of things. I think there's a wide array of what people expect from him at this point. So that would be one that I would worry about.
Okay. And I'll say Devontae, because as confident as I am in Devontae, I still think he could be susceptible to disappointment if he's not able to make the gains in maturity and focus that we were all hoping that he can. All right, that'll do it for us on this week's episode of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live and be part of the live chat, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording, or you can always subscribe to our podcast by searching for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com/join or text 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Thank you for listening. We will be back to talk IU hoops again with you next week. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out.
Okay, and that's a wrap. Well done, gents.
Only 72 minutes to record that whole thing. I'm surprised. That was quick. It just seemed like a longer show, but it wasn't. Maybe it was because that long first segment.
Yeah, long first segment. And then we had some technical issues at the beginning. Thanks for being here, everybody. Awesome seeing some new people live, as always.
Love seeing people here in the off season.
Man, seriously, like when you see like the amount of people that are showing up live and the downloads, like I think it's gonna be crazy how much things grow next season.
Especially if certain things happen.
Like wins?
Well, I mean for us.
Oh yeah, well that would help.
But yeah, no, I'm excited, man. I really am excited for next year for the season. It's gonna be fun.
I am too.
There's just a lot of talent, and I mean, you get excited when you hear Archie talk about basketball and you hear him talk about his plans. And then when you get the talent in that he can mold for, that is great. And what I love about it is that we have the one guy to build around, but you also have all these other pieces that are going to be here for a couple years, and that makes it so much better because they're all going to grow.
Hey, Chad, we've got a request here. Chad says, does Andy have any random things he'd like to bring up off the air?
Does
no
who?
secrets. Andy. You're always, bringing
I'm an open book.
Yeah, revealing stuff. Yeah, what about Andy? What?
Boy.
You have any rants or?
I don't really feel like it.
You're like our Ned Flanders. You're just like, you never say anything mean to anybody. Except the post office. I hate the post office.
Or shaving points.
Well, that was an interesting statement, Andy. Who are you talking about there?
That's hard to say. No.
It's been hard for me to find. You need to say more like outlandish things. It's hard for me to find drops of you. It's easy with Ryan. He says like
my best
every show.
I'll try to do more of that. No, I don't know. I don't really have anything. I don't know. I mean, if there's something somebody wants to know, I'm happy to. I mean, I'm not going to not necessarily answer things, but
hey, you know what? And okay, that's what we need to do. We need to do an Ask Me Anything episode with Andy Bond. Like when there's nothing going on,
and just Jerod sitting there waiting for drops. It's just Jerod sitting there waiting.
Yeah.
For
so everybody has to.
Yeah, Jerod planning questions.
Yes. Yeah. They get Andy to say ridiculous things. Yeah, that's what we're gonna do.
Yeah, that seems like a good idea. I don't see how that could go wrong. No, I don't know. I don't really have any nothing's really sticking in my craw at this point. I don't have any no rants, no whatever else. I mean, I feel like probably best to stay away from any thoughts on the Eagles being uninvited from the White House. So, and the Reds are really hard to discuss. So sports wise, there's not a lot going on.
Yeah, they just lost a series to the Padres.
Yeah, there was somebody posted their record against like teams that are over 500. It's not good.
It's
not good.
It's not good.
Okay, seriously though, would it be foolishly self-indulgent to like schedule AMA episodes for each one of us? Like would we be setting ourselves up for just crickets and no one asking questions, or do you think that could actually be fun?
I don't know. Maybe if we promoted them for a while, but I think it would be better to do that like leading up to the season, probably.
Yeah,
like
but just like
I mean, like, I don't know. We could do one
replacing Assembly Call Radio, but
right. No, I know. I'm saying, but I think it would be a good thing to do in season when more people are focused on the show and on that stuff. I think it would be good to do one with you and see what the reaction was.
Why am I the guinea pig?
Because you're the host. You're like the main go-to host, and you're the guy.
Yeah, but I do the mailbags and do all that stuff. I think it should be Andy.
I'm for Andy doing it.
All right. Well, we will develop this idea.
Looks good on you though.
Looks good on you. Yeah. You do an AMA, you better get a free bowl of soup. All right. I got to get to work. All right. I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you. Yep.
All right.
Peace. Thanks for watching, everybody.
All right.
Sounds good.
See y'all next week.
All right. I'll talk to you later.
Later.
And I'm not here the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, you're not here the next 2 weeks. So we'll see if Coach is free. We'll see if Zach is free. We'll get them on here. Are there any individual players you want us to save, like that you for sure don't want us to do the next couple weeks, so that you're around for them if we need to do a player
Robert Johnson,
because nothing else happens?
No, I can't think of anybody. That's kind of why I said the Justin Smith one I thought would be good, because I mean I think that was a somewhat obvious one to do this week, just because I thought that would be a big kind of interest point for people. But
okay,
otherwise there's nobody that I have strong feelings about.
Okay. Sweet. All right, man.
All right.
Well, I'll see you on email.
Yeah. All right. Sounds good.
All right. See you, everybody.
See ya. Thanks, everybody.